I think the bigger point is recruiting and hiring is a management task. Your board or your investors can maybe help you close people that are on the fence. But if you're relying on them to source, vet, and deliver basically close-ready candidates for you, I think you're doing entrepreneurship all wrong.
It's the week of January 26th. Welcome to the Learning Corner, a Precursor Ventures podcast. Welcome to the Learning Corner by Precursor. I'm Mia Farnham, and I'm joined by our GP and managing partner, Charles Hudson, where we will be talking through the articles and good reads that caught our team's attention over the past week. Our first topic is a post on X by Jason Lemkin titled Brex and the Pros and Cons of Hubristic Fundraising. Brex was obviously recently acquired by Capital One for north of $5 billion, minting itself as a top-performing exit in less than 10 years. However, that did not stop people from questioning whether this exit should be deemed an undisputed success story. Jason claims this stems from the consequences of hubristic fundraising. When companies raise at valuations that require only the rarest of outcomes, the highest of revenue multiples, and create expectations for an exit path where anything less than a $20 billion exit is considered a massive failure. He walked through some of the pros and cons of the fundraising approach, and the pros being attracting talent and capital. It keeps competitors at bay. However, from a con perspective, it changes the motivations of the talent you bring on, possibly clouds decision-making, and the bar for success becomes more and more impossible to reach. Lemkin warns this dynamic is roaring back with AI. Companies like Thinking Machine Labs raising $2 billion at seed at a $12 billion valuation with no product. And while these companies may achieve incredible outcomes, founders and investors likely need to deeply consider whether this siren call is truly a survival choice or a dangerous trap.
Yeah.
There were a lot of pieces written about the Brex exit, and I appreciated that Jason's piece made it clear that two things can happen at once. It can be ludicrous that a $5 billion exit is scoffed at. And also, it's not that difficult to understand how people got to that conclusion.
Yeah.
So what were your thoughts on the piece?
I really like the frame. I have so much to say about it. First of all, there are a lot of takes I read. I'm like, do people not understand liquidation? Everyone's like, look how much money the last round. I'm like, late stage investors are pretty good at downside protection. I have not seen the waterfall, but liquidation preferences exist for a reason. And the total consideration was well north of liquidation preference. So there are probably people who made less money than they expected, but I don't feel bad for anybody on that cap table. Second, I think if you look at the distribution of outcomes, when you invested really mattered. And the people who did early, I'm quite sure are very happy with this outcome, and they should be. But I think this is just what modern venture capital has become. It's become chasing these like very far outlier outcomes. And as long as you're a management team that understands, if I continue to raise in this way, I'm signing up for these like 0.1% outlier outcomes. And anything that isn't that will feel like less than success. And there's room between failure and less than success, but you won't make everybody who gave you money happy. And the other thing is, I talk to portfolio companies all the time, and they're like, I don't understand. How did this company raise these 3 successive rounds? And I'm like, well, some of this is king-making activity. Some of this is, Bill Gurley had some comments about the observer effect. I do think we've also gotten into this like weird mimetic cycle where like a company that's hot raises more money, so people assume that it's hot, so they raise more money. And everyone's like, what are they going to do with all that money? I'm like, I don't know. I'm personally very interested to see what happens with companies like Cursor that really were on tear and were able to quickly raise round after round after round. And a year ago, I would have said it's very unlikely that Cursor is not the winner in coding agents. And now I think it's a much more contestable category. So I think with some of these early AI companies, we're going to see more things like this. Yeah. We've seen it already. We saw this with Character. We've seen some other companies where the ultimate consideration didn't look great if you were on the cap table. But this is modern venture capital. It is like these home run outlier outcomes are kind of all that matter for the big funds. And if you take their money, you are signing up to build one of those. And if you fall short, you fall short. Yeah.
I know we had this question go around internally during our team chat about this, but it's kind of like chicken or the egg. Who created the dynamic of hubristic fundraising? Is it because bigger funds are motivated to move larger sums of capital out the door and then are willing to take the risk on higher valuations as a result? Or is it because founders know that they have all the leverage and therefore can kind of like steer a conversation whatever direction? What's your perspective?
Yes, and I think the other thing, and Jason kind of mentioned this, I think maybe in the comments, secondaries really did change this whole game. Because it'd be one thing if you're a founder and you're like, oh, I'm common and I'm long every time we raise money. I'm not taking anything off the table. Maybe that changes your calculus. But if you're like, hey, at this really inflated Series C price or Series D price, I can take 10, 15, 25, $50 million off the table and put that in my pocket. now I really can I can basically gamble for the big outcome, and I'm already taking care of myself. I don't know if founders would have the same motivation to chase these high valuations if they were looking up at that liquidation preference stack and saying, like, if I don't clear that, I could build a really great multi-billion-dollar company and walk away with nothing.
Yeah.
So I do think like the founder secondaries, but I also think the big funds really want to put money into things that have momentum and are working. And if you have momentum and are working, it takes a certain discipline to say no to that $500 million.
Yeah. And then you brought up yesterday, I guess, Stripe too is a good example of at every valuation, which people deem from the outside that's too high, that's overpriced, like we continue to crawl up higher. And so not the first time, but one of the first that people were saying you can continuously make 5 to 10x over and over and over again, even when you think the ceiling has already arrived.
If you did Anthropic at $1 billion, you're feeling very good right. You're feeling very good right now.
Yes.
Very good.
We talked through as a team also the different pros and cons that Jason listed that come out of hubristic fundraising. And the one that jumped out the most from a con perspective for me was that you start to attract mercenaries, not missionaries. So instead of the people who join simply because the mission is too good to pass up, people sometimes crowd around your company because the outcome itself is the prize. Charles, have you seen this manifest across companies in real life? And like, when do you start to see it unfolding?
It's so funny. I tell our portfolio companies there are only two kinds of hiring problems of fame and hiring problems of obscurity. Hiring problems of obscurity are like, no one's heard of your startup. How do you get people to even care? And how do you get them to interview? And so hard. Then you raise a Series A and you do some press and people have heard about your company. Then you start getting these people who are very qualified, very good at interviewing, and are basically joining your company because they think they're getting in on a rocket ship early and they are more mercenary. And sometimes founders are slow to adjust their expectations and their lens. And so I always tell people, hey, we're a hot company now, or hey, we're a company that people desire. Be more careful about who you let into your organization. But I think Jason kind of framed it the right way. The mercenary people will stay on the rocket ship as long as it has momentum and it's growing. And as soon as that's not the case, they're going to leave and you should expect them to leave. And a lot of this, I feel like, is you're signing up for a set of rules in a game. And the worst thing you can do is sign up and play a game where you don't actually understand what you signed up for.
Well, our next topic is a brief post from Aaron Hoffman on LinkedIn, walking through the reality that VCs cannot help win talent in today's market, regardless of what they tell founders. In today's war for AI talent, Aaron claimed this benefit is most certainly overpromised and used more as a mechanism to close the deal, as opposed to staying true to it when a founder needs the support. This post got so much good chatter in the comments, since this is something that firms have marketed as an asset for years. Some founders and VCs deeply agreed with the statement, and then others did have some strong opinions against from personal experiences of their own. So wanted to pause for your thoughts here first.
I think on average, Oren's right. And I think this is one of those things, Oren's both an investor and an entrepreneur, but I think Oren's right. I think on average, VCs cannot do much to help you with hiring. Now, if you had a world-class AI engineer and you had a partner at a very top tier firm where to reach out to that person, maybe it has an impact. I have seen some people's platform teams be very good at helping to service candidates, but I think the bigger point is recruiting and hiring is a management task. Your board or your investors can maybe help you close people that are on the fence, but if you're relying on them to source, vet, and deliver basically close-ready candidates for you, I think you're doing entrepreneurship all wrong. So my view has always been, what I can help you with is if there's someone on the fence who needs a little bit of a nudge or wants some perspective, or if you as a founder want a second set of eyes on the candidate, happy to do it. But the notion that your early stage VCs are going to deliver candidates, there are very few people who can do that at scale.
And I'm talking with a handful of founders right now. We're facing the issue of close the round, hooray, and now they have to hire. And I think they're almost faced with, I don't even know where to start, because I have to possibly search through all of the folks that I don't want to give any time in order to find the right people. Is there actually a way to make that more efficient beyond just going through referrals, or do you just have to kind of go through the process and be patient?
I think becoming good at hiring is a CEO skill, just like fundraising, just like strategy, just like planning. And I don't think there's any shortcuts. You have to figure out how to hire well, which usually means you have to spend a lot of time on hiring. And so people are like, it's inefficient. I'm like, you know what else is bad? Randomly letting non-performing people into your company is bad. So hiring is hard because finding fit for a startup with people who will be effective, good additions to your culture, and believe in your company's mission, it's hard because it's supposed to be hard. So I don't know. We have some terrific recruiting founders in our portfolio, and almost all of them treat recruiting as a first-class priority. They work on it every single day. and they are always thinking about ways to up-level the talent in their company. And I think the people who are as maniacal about recruiting as they are about product generally end up building great companies.
Yeah. And what do the modes typically look like for those types of founders? Are they just constantly out in the ecosystem trying to meet new people, or are they just always keeping an ear on the ground for good folks that come their way?
And I talked to one of our founders who's a really good recruiter, and he's like, I do something every day. He's like, sometimes that is sending a third message to somebody who I've been trying to get to know who hasn't responded. Sometimes it's grabbing coffee with a friend of mine who I think maybe knows people who might be in the ecosystem. Sometimes it's getting a perspective on a hire that I know I'm not going to make for a year, but I want to get, this person's hiring a CFO. He's like, I have a VP of finance. I don't know what it's like to have a CFO. So I've been asking a bunch of people, hey, I'm thinking about hiring a CFO in a year. Like, what do I need to know if I'm going to kick this search off in a year?
Yeah.
And so I think most people hear recruiting and they think I'm just like blindly sending LinkedIn messages. That's not what it is. That's not it. There's a lot of activities that go into recruiting, and this person has this knack for having good people show up at the right time. I think it's because they're always thinking about, how do I get our recruiting needs out into my network in the ecosystem? And how do I find people who might be a good fit for our company?
I think that's a good balance, because I've also seen some folks take a different route, which they just, when they meet great people, regardless of what their need is, they just hire them, which I think you could do that to a point, and then you might have over-indexed on a specific archetype of person and leave like a massive hole of key positions that you need to hire for.
And I think there are times to be opportunistic. But if you find somebody who you think is great, who's going to bring something special to the company, by all means, hire them.
Even if we weren't in this talent war for AI talent, is it still a fair statement to say that VCs still are overpromising as it pertains to making large impact from a hiring and talent?
I think most VCs who say that can't deliver on it. They just can't. I think it's mostly because most candidates aren't influenced by your choice of investor.
Yeah.
Investors can do a lot of things that are helpful, though. They can publicize your job listing. They can get it out to more people. They can encourage people to apply. They can share. There's a lot of things they can do, but not all those things will be directly attributable to making a hire.
Yeah.
And so it's one of these things where it's asymmetric. Like if they tell you they can do it and you believe it and you make a decision based on it, it was a good investment by that firm to tell you that message.
Yeah.
Because you can't be like, oh, because you didn't deliver me my CTO, I want my shares back. There's no takebacks. So some of this, I think, is, as Oren mentioned, marketing. But there's a few firms I think that can actually deliver.
Yeah. I think maybe someone from the outside would instantly assume the people who deliver are these bigger mega funds that have the brand that lures in. Do you have some examples in your brain that you're like, no, not as much of a brand, just like really good at closing talent?
I know some smaller funds that have really strong kind of cult communities around them.
Yeah.
And that they're able to get people in that cult community into their portfolio companies, but not because they're good at recruiting. It's because they've built a community of people who trust and respect the person at the center of it.
Yeah.
So when that person says, hey, this is an opportunity you should consider, people take it seriously.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that people would leave their cushy job to come work for a startup just because of the brand. It would be maybe the person who's behind the brand that's like been along the ride to tell them like, no, this is worth paying for. Our last piece is written by Sanyoja, titled "The Death of SaaS Has Been Greatly Exaggerated," and pushes back against the narrative that SaaS as a business model is dead, arguing instead that while AI is changing the rules, the game is far from over. She tackles the misconception that because AI makes building software easier, enterprises will just generate tools in-house, stating that the massive effort required in standardization, management, and institutional memory is a huge blockade. While vibe coding lowers the cost of trying things, it doesn't lower the cost of being wrong, placing a premium on reliable software that enterprises don't want to build themselves.
Yeah.
She also touches on vendor fatigue, how enterprise customers are now questioning whether switching from incumbents to new AI vendors offers material enough improvement to justify the disruption. And that all roads in AI lead back to data, meaning every serious AI deployment depends on the very systems, the ERPs or HRISs, CRM, that incumbents already own and control.
Yeah.
And incumbents sit inside the massive workflows that drive enterprise decisions. So they do benefit from moving slowly. She closes with a balanced view. Incumbents have real advantages, but no guarantees.
Yeah.
So they have to replatform around AI and rethink workflows to survive. However, the death of SaaS has not arrived quite yet. Do you feel like actually within your own circles, Charles, that they're taking the side that SaaS is dead, or?
It's the like avant-garde position to take that SaaS is dead. And it's interesting. I have a friend who wrote on LinkedIn like, hey, I got rid of all of these software tools because I don't want to pay for them. I've built my own. I'm like, that's cool. But part of what you're paying for in software is like maintenance, upkeep, uptime, and future releases. So you fired your CRM provider, but now you're the CRM
You
provider.
are it.
So you are it. So like everything you want the CRM to do, you now have to code. And I was at the Stanford Investor Summit last weekend, which is awesome. And in one of the sessions, someone made a comment. It's one thing to vibe code a prototype over a weekend. It's another thing to launch a production system that's 99.99% uptime and works. And I think I worry that people are looking at prototypes and saying, oh, well, I prototyped Salesforce in a weekend. Therefore, Salesforce is dead. I'm like, well, you prototyped a version of Salesforce that works for your very specific set of circumstances that you've played with for a weekend. So you haven't actually found all the rough edges yet. And so I think what we're going to learn is that most people don't actually want to be in the business of maintaining these apps that they build. It's fun to prototype. It's fun to test things out. Yes, it makes it feel like it's easier to build things. But it's funny. I spent a lot of time in Cloud Code. My big takeaway is I would much rather use Notion with Claude Code and have Claude Code do the hard parts of setting up and configuring databases in Notion than do it myself. So my conclusion is Notion is actually a far more valuable software product to me. You could substitute Notion for Airtable. I have 3 or 4 tools. I'm like, wow, this tool is way more valuable to me now that I have Claude Code who can talk to it and do technical things that are slightly beyond. So I think this notion that everyone's going to run their own ERP or CRM system. I mean, the other reason in companies you hire vendors is so that you can yell at them when things go wrong.
To blame.
Right. You don't want to be the person who hard coded or who vibe coded the ERP system.
Because then you have to fire someone.
Yourself.
And
then when the ERP system goes down, the CEO's in your office saying, why did the CRM, why did they?
It's so much easier to say like, Salesforce people.
That's right. And I think maintenance, upgrades, and feature development are not trivial. And there will be some people who build bespoke things that only work for them, and they're going to have an amazing experience. I think in the end, what we're going to find is the number of things that people really throw out for good is going to be a lot smaller than that.
For me, her point on vendor fatigue being a large reason why SaaS isn't dead yet was really impactful. So when enterprise customers purchase traditional SaaS-based software, that's typically a decision that took months. There were competitors discussed. There's like a whole dog and pony show. And entire implementation teams stood up on site to launch and maintain the system. So the fatigue is actually deep leverage that SaaS has over newer tools that AI brings. Charles, do you feel like enterprise customers have become tired or more critical, or perhaps both, about the emergence of shiny new AI tools come to replace the legacy stuff?
Everyone I know who works on AI transformation tells me it's really hard and that it takes longer, and the results you get from ROI are not nearly as immediate as management teams would like to see them. So it's like every other technology project in the history of time. Takes longer, doesn't give you what you wanted as quickly as you thought, and it's more expensive than you think. I think what you are seeing though is as things like net revenue retention and gross revenue retention and churn, I think we sort of were getting to a place where to some extent SaaS vendors might have done this to themselves, making it hard to cancel, changing pricing plans, all in an effort to extract more money from customers. I think created a fair amount of resentment and frustration on the part of customers that like, these are all very tricky, dark arts. You didn't just tell me, hey, we're taking you from $12. I'll never forget when our Slack bill went up, I was like, wait, what happened? And they changed the window over which they measure an active user. And I'm like, well, it's your right to change that, but this feels hostile to me. It makes me think this vendor doesn't have my best interests at heart. So I do think in an effort, ironically driven by a lot of the SaaS metrics that investors are public and private are obsessed with, I think there's some software vendors who might have gone too far. And so it's natural that customers are responding to that by thinking about alternatives.
I was also thinking about how SaaS can't be dead yet, just by the nature of how these massive enterprise customers are just structured internally. There's a procurement team who has had their budgets set up for years, and they sign off like once, twice a year to change the pace at which they make those decisions and get those greenlit. It's the same group of people actually in the decision pool that would be involved if there were AI tooling, and you're asking them to completely reshuffle the way that they make those decisions. Like, unfortunately, like you can't make a 20,000 person company operate as quickly as a 10-person company. I mean, at Precursor, when we see a new tool, we like run it by, we like see if it checks out with security, and then we're like, go ahead, try it out. That doesn't work for 20,000, especially if it's a multi-million-dollar tool. Can you imagine the amount of decision that has to go through? You only had to allocate that for one tool. And now you're like, how do I branch this out and do a decision matrix for 6, 7, 9 different tools? And then I'm going to manage it myself. It's just a little unrealistic for how it's done today.
I think the smart SaaS vendors that I've seen are trying to stall for time and telling their customers, we have AI things that are coming. Look, here you go. Look over here.
Yeah.
We're going to catch up. And I think a good example is Google. I think Google, like with Gemini, really did catch up and close the gap. And I'm sure if you were thinking about moving off of G Suite, you maybe like, well, Google's like giving me some of the AI stuff I want. It's pretty good. Maybe we don't have to move after all.
Yeah. It'll also be interesting to see what the chatter is internally at some of these larger enterprise customers if they are trying to look at the internal infrastructure of, okay, if this is coming down the road, how could we structure and get our teams in a place to make these decisions quicker? Because that has to work before any of this else comes to roost. So it'll be interesting. Well, we are on time, Charles. Thank you. It's always so fun doing it in person. Thank you, our listeners, for jumping in as well. Please like and subscribe, and we will talk to you all next week. Thank you.
Bye.